Hey, Larken Rose here, and I thought I'd do a video responding to a very common question, or sort of category of questions, that I get all over the place, and I'm going to use an actual example of somebody's comment that sort of revolves around the thing of, okay, but how do we get there to a stateless society from where we are now? By the way, Jones Plantation novel is out, and I mentioned this before, but whether you want to buy one copy or buy it in bulk and sell it for an evil profit, because you can get it much cheaper if you buy it by the case, the place to get that is thejonesplantation.com with a "the" on it. The novel has a "the." The movie does not, as astute observers may have noticed, which is kind of weird. But yeah, if you want to buy a bunch and sell them online or in person or wherever you want, feel free. So when people try to ponder the concept of a stateless society, starting with the, what we have now, it's understandable that they say, well, how do you get there? So here's one example of that kind of question. I'm going to address both sides of it, the practical sort of logistical side, but also I have to point out how much of the philosophical side of it is built into the question as a misunderstanding. So I'm going to read the whole comment, and then I'll sort of go piece by piece. I forget even where this was. Was it on YouTube or on Facebook? I don't know. Doesn't matter. Lots of people ask things like this. How would you... Oh, yeah, that's right. It was somebody's comment under somebody else saying, if you have questions about anarchy, ask them here. And then somebody asked this. How would you implement your belief on a large scale while avoiding human nature and mob mentality? What system would be used for justice without central organization? What system would be used to combat military threats without centralized authority? How would consumers be protected from a completely deregulated marketplace? How would mega projects be decided upon without an authoritative body overseeing it? And this is... The person asking that question added this: anarchy is only for very small groups with a specific moral code that is mutually shared and supported. The bigger a population is, the more implausible it becomes, kind of like trying to get 50 people to agree on pizza toppings. Good friggin' luck. Okay, so that's his question followed by his opinion. I want to first look at the philosophical and psychological assumptions in these questions, which, I'm not making fun of the person, but this often happens. Like the first part, how would you implement your belief? What are you talking about? It's literally a lack of a thing. Anarchy is lack of a ruling class. So you could compare it to, like, if some island tribe had forever believed in a volcano god and was, throwing human sacrifices into it to try to appease the gods, and somebody came along and said, I don't think there is a volcano god. I think that's just a thing in nature that maybe we don't fully understand. And I don't think it's really good to throw people into it, and it doesn't even seem to make a difference anyway. And then somebody comes along, okay, fine, you don't believe in a volcano god. How would you implement your belief? It's just a lack of one stupid idea. You don't need to implement it. If you then had an island of people who didn't think there was a volcano god and didn't throw people into it, what would that question even mean? Well, how will everything work if we don't believe in a volcano god? Well, to a large degree, it would work how it already did, with people being people and interacting and trading and cooperating and organizing and doing a billion things. The only difference is we're going to stop throwing people into the volcano. And so the idea that we're implementing a belief when it comes to doing away with statism is already backwards. Now, I know what he means. He means, how do you get from a society that believes in a ruling class to a society that doesn't? What does that look like? How are things, dealt with, and which he gets into more. But it's important to notice that there's still the sort of master plan assumption and the master plan template and premise behind the questions. What system would be used for justice without central organization? Are you asking me, how am I going to make everybody behave? Because I'm not. I'm not going to be in charge either. Neither are you. If he's just asking for predictions like, well, what do you think people would do about it? Okay, you can discuss that. And you can, if you're asking for suggestions, you can do that too. But the question is coming from a place where mentally all they've ever heard in the discussion is ideas of master plans to be imposed upon humanity. And the idea of humanity without one, there is no guy in charge making everybody do things a certain way, is an inherently uncomfortable thought for people who've never considered that. So much so that they would rather cling to a centralized authoritarian solution that obviously doesn't work and is massively immoral and destructive than contemplate a world in which there is no violently imposed central master plan. Because that's something they're not used to. They're used to seeing the violent, evil government version of humanity and all its destructiveness and all the horrendousness that leads to, but that's familiar to them. And the idea of there's no one in charge, it's so unfamiliar that you can even see in the questions that he's still thinking in terms of, well, how will everybody do this? How the hell would I know? Are you thinking I can guess that? Or are you thinking I'm going to be in charge? Because either way, no and no. What system would be used to combat military threats without centralized authority? Now, when he's asking an anarchist this, it's like you being the one who just told me that there's no volcano god. It's now on you. The responsibility is on you to describe for me how we can have reliable crops when we're not appeasing the volcano gods. And the response is, no, it isn't. The volcano gods never did that anyway. But also, it's bad to throw people into a volcano. And that is true whether or not you know how the crops are going to be handled. And whether people do a stupid job handling them when they're not throwing people into a volcano. But the mentality that there will be a central decider for these things is the problem. But it's so hard for people to get out of that mindset that they often build the problem into their questions. How would consumers be protected from a completely deregulated marketplace? Now, as I said, I'm going to talk about the logistical side of these things because there are logistical answers. But first, you have to recognize the philosophical problem of somebody who thinks that government does this. How would consumers be protected from a completely deregulated marketplace? Well, there wouldn't be a gigantic authoritarian monstrosity that just forced billions of people to take a harmful, completely unnecessary, experimental monstrosity of a treatment that has caused massive problems and solved absolutely nothing. There wouldn't be that. There wouldn't be a mechanism by which the violence of the central master planners could make people do things horribly destructive. Okay, that would be nice. But what if somebody makes a dangerous product? I know. What if we invent something like, we could call it Consumer Reports, where it's just a company, and what they do is they check out new products, and they don't take advertising and stuff, and they see what they think, and they write articles, and they can do it about everything from a widget to a car, and say, yeah, we tested this out, and we like this, we like that, we're not too sure about this, this thing might actually be dangerous. We could do something like that. Oh, wait, that already happens, and it isn't just one magazine, it's a gazillion things. We could invent something like Yelp, or Google, or literally anybody pasting a review anywhere about anything, when they say, here's what I didn't like about this product, or here's what I did like about it. Or you could have a company, let's call it Underwriters Laboratories. A lot of people don't even know what that is. I believe they still exist. And they have existed for a long-ass time. And what they do is they test the safety of things like appliances. They're not a government agency. But if they test it and go, yeah, it's pretty safe, we put it through its paces to see if we can make anything go wrong with it, and it seems decent. So now we are willing to stick our label on that UL listing that says, yeah, we're okay with people buying that. We don't think it's going to blow up and kill them. Cool. Now, the moment a company like that gets caught taking money to cover up something dangerous, they're done. Their reputation's done, which means the company's done. They're gone. As opposed to government doing it, where they totally take money to approve dangerous things. That's literally all the FDA ever does, is take tons of money from Big Pharma to approve dangerous, destructive things while stomping on perfectly safe things that don't make Big Pharma money. That's literally the main job of the FDA. While they pretend they're about protecting the public. No, they're stinking not. And if anybody still thinks they're about that after the last few years, don't know what to tell you. You're just frickin' delusional. In a stateless society, things like this, like how do we know that products are safe? People want their products to be safe. That means there's a market for figuring out ways to show that products are safe. People want to be able to know that. So they buy magazines and they read this and they read reviews and they check out when people are testing things to see how safe they are. As opposed to when you have a government regulatory agency which can force it isn't just telling people, hey, we don't think this thing's all that safe. This seems much safer. No, now you have government power by way of these agencies deciding what's safe. And what's safe, golly gee, just happens to match whatever serves the interests of the ruling class, their money, their power, and all that. And so they can say, well, I don't know, we might have to consider making vitamin C a prescription, that you're not allowed to sell vitamin C without a prescription and going through all that paperwork and rigmarole. They were talking about that for a while. You can look it up. Now, will that ever pass? Seems pretty damn unlikely. You'll be finding people on the street corner. Hey, want to buy some vitamin C? Just, how ridiculous would that be? But they were trying to do that. Is it because they care about your health? No. Literally all you can do if you overdose on vitamin C is crap a lot. That's the symptom. That's the end result of you ate too much vitamin C, is you get diarrhea. Doesn't do anything else bad. What about literally everything the FDA has ever approved? Well, they have this huge list of horrible side effects, often including you might frickin' die. But they approve it. Huh. Golly gee, it's almost like when you give somebody a power monopoly, they no longer give a shit what you want. And if what you were hoping they were going to do is objectively, in an unbiased, neutral way, tell you what's safe and what isn't, you're delusional. A private company doing that actually has an incentive to do it. Underwriters, Consumer Report, a million other magazines and just articles and just people posting reviews. And it doesn't mean it'll be perfect, and it doesn't mean people won't try to sell something. And that's one of the main problems is people, first of all, they start by imagining that government does any of these. How would you have a system of justice? Does anybody think the government system of justice provides justice? Really? Now, I know a lot of people watch way too much TV, and on TV, the justice system gives a crap about what's true. In real life, it doesn't. Money will buy your way out of almost anything. And if you're poor and easy to frame by some power-happy bastard, with a badge, yeah, you're screwed. You're probably going to prison. Government already doesn't do what you're worried about. How are we going to do this without a ruling class? Step 1, don't give anybody permission to violently impose their crappy solutions on everybody else. Step 2, see what other solutions people come up with, and people can decide which they think is doing a good job. And already, even in the existence of a ruling class that steals trillions of dollars to do their version of justice, there is a massive market for private arbitration, because it already, in spite of everybody being robbed to build that monster, private arbitration already does a way better job in a huge number of cases where there's a dispute. So that both parties agree, well, we're going to go to this arbitration company and present both sides, and we're going to agree ahead of time to abide by whatever they decide. We're going to voluntarily do that to A, save $1 million billion costs of going through the court system, and we don't nearly trust the courts. That already happens. Just like private security is already way better than dialing 911 if something bad happens, so the cops can show up a half hour later, shoot your dog, and write a report about how dead you are. Thanks. Whatever would we do without you? But that's the main problem in these questions. If you think it's the job of centralized big authoritarian mommy state or daddy state to save the day, then you're not taking it upon yourself to be responsible enough to say, well, what should we, the mere peasantry, do about these things? Like, if somebody's breaking my house at 2 a.m, maybe the neighbors should know each other and know who, like, knows how to fight or has a gun or something. So that, like, hey, if I hear somebody break my window at 2 a.m, like, I know you have a shotgun, I know you, I trust you. Can I call you? And you can call me if the same thing happens to you. Because pretty sure, A, you're going to get there before the police by a factor of 10,000. And B, you're not going to shoot me or my dog in the process. I laugh. I'm not sure I should laugh, because they do that all the time, and they shoot the wrong people all the time because they don't give a shit. They do, as thugs of the state, they do not have any economic incentive to serve the people, to protect and serve. They protect and serve the ruling class. That's who pays them. You're forced to give money to the ruling class, who then pays the badge-wearing thugs. They don't give a shit if you're protected. Like, what difference does that make to them? Well, you're not going to get paid anymore if you don't protect me. Yes, they are. You didn't have a choice. It's called taxation. So when somebody says, well, without government, how would we do that? Voluntarily. The answer is voluntarily. And a zillion people can provide a zillion different ideas on how to do it, and you get to decide which one of those, or 2 or 3 or 10, you want to participate in, you want to fund, or services you want to purchase. And one of the things that takes the biggest mental adjustment is, like, if you have status talking to an anarchist, how will this be done? First of all, like, if somebody's talking to me, the idea that I would have the best idea how to do all these things, why on earth would you think I would? I don't think I would have the best idea on any of these things, and I don't need to, because in a free society, you can ask the whole stinking world, hey, what are we going to do about, like, scary people breaking in the middle of the night? And lots of people will go, and somebody will go, wait, I have an idea. And then somebody who's thought about it way more than I have and has way better ideas than I do, somebody like Dale Brown of Threat Management Center, will say, well, here's what we do. Here's the services we provide. Here's our approach to it with de-escalation. And there's no way I would have come up with all the things they understand and they implement and they use in their training of people who work for them. And it's brilliant and it's really cool. And I'm no expert on how they do it, but I've read enough, and I had the pleasure of meeting Dale Brown for like 5 seconds in the halls at, I think that was Anarchapulco one year. But I've read enough about what they do to go, yeah, they have a way better grasp on exactly how to deal with these things than I do. So they can do it. I don't have to. It's not my job. It doesn't have to be your job. And here's the tough part for most people. It doesn't even have to be your job to know who's going to come up with the idea. That just happens. And there's a lot of questions you could do. It's sort of like, well, if we didn't have government, how are we going to have like communication technology to talk to each other? Well, we do, because private industry competing with each other made miracle after miracle happen until we have things that are this big and fit in our pocket and we can talk to anybody on the planet with them and do all sorts, million other things with them at the same time. Did that come about because a centralized authoritarian monster really wanted you to be able to do that? No. It came about because people thought, if we can make one of these, we'll make a crap ton of money because people will want them. If we can make something people want to voluntarily buy, we can make a ton of money and all these people can have what we made. And that's the beauty of a free market, which we have nothing like a free market. But the beauty of a free market is even the most greedy bastard, the best way for him to enrich himself is to serve and create value for others. Not because he gives a crap about them. I mean, maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. Doesn't make any difference. But if he wants to sell something to lots of people, he has to make something that lots of people want to buy. How about government? They don't have to give a shit. They say, give us your money, or we take your house, or throw you in a cage, or just wipe out your bank account. What's the incentive for them to do any of these things well? There isn't one, which is why they suck at absolutely all of them. And to me, one of the most ridiculous ones, how do we combat military threats without centralized authority? Literally all of the military threats, A, are a result of people's belief in government, and B, are a result of the actions of the U.S. military going around making enemies all over the world. Meanwhile, even the founders of this country talked about this. The ideal way to prevent invasion is have the people be armed. The militia, as in an armed populace. That is far and away the best way to avoid being oppressed by a standing army, including the standing army of your own stinking country, which is why they didn't want a standing army. So I could sort of go on and on about each one of these things, but just the change in mentality that people have to go, how would mega projects be decided upon without an authoritative body overseeing it? Go to a city. The end. Just go to a city. You'll see gigantic skyscrapers that were not built by government. Private industry did that. You'll see ridiculous forms of communication and energy creation and transfer and a million billion different things that were created by voluntary interaction. Go to a supermarket too. How are we going to be fed if there isn't a centralized government feeding us all? We already know how that happens. Go to a supermarket, find out. You'll have 80 billion things to choose from. And some of them are totally unhealthy, and some of them are healthy, and you get to choose. You even have the right to choose to eat stuff that isn't that healthy. Wow, you're in charge of your own stinking life. Imagine that. So, and then we come to his commentary, which again, it shows the inability to get out of the master plan mindset. He said, anarchy is only for very small groups with a specific moral code that is mutually shared and supported. Now remember, anarchy means a lack of a ruling class. Okay, so if you start with a little group and you add some people and you add some people, when does it suddenly become moral and necessary to take some of those people, put them on a throne and say, you get to violently dominate the rest of us? For a minute there, I thought we were going to have anarchy. Luckily, we appointed as our lords and masters a bunch of parasitical crooks who will now violently rob and dominate us all. When people think in the big scale, which is how politicians always talk, it's like, well, this whole country, 300 million people, or the whole planet, 8 billion people. How are we going to manage, what? When you live your life, you're going about your day-to-day life, are you dealing with 8 billion people? Are you dealing with 300 million people? No, you're dealing with the people around you, and the people around you are dealing with you. Sometimes there are bad actors, and the other people have to decide what to do about it. all the way up to like, I'm going to shoot you because you tried to kill me with an axe, down to you suck, I'm just going to disassociate from you. Like, you're obnoxious, but you don't seem to be violent, so we're just going to keep our distance. Heck with you. Oh, darn it, you're a tax collector, you work for government. I can't just disassociate from you, thanks to government saving the day. The idea that there needs to be something managing the gigantic categories of people, why? Like, in what way do we all need to be doing the same thing the same way? And even the thing of, well, what about really big projects? There are enormous projects. Ocean liners, airlines, literally private companies that are launching satellites into space and now flying people up into space that didn't require government. But if you're stuck in the mindset of, well, there needs to be some final decider in charge to remove any uncertainty or unpredictability, it already doesn't do that. It's never done that. Like, the existence of a ruling class doesn't make every product safe. It doesn't mean war isn't going to happen. As you may have noticed, the existence of the U.S. military has made sure that war is happening somewhere in the world pretty much constantly for almost all of the history of the country. Well, without government, how do we avoid war? By not having government. Like, that's step one. And so all of these questions presuppose that government is accomplishing any of this when it's obviously provably not. But the idea that, well, it would work in a little group, but as soon as you add enough people, like, suddenly we don't know how to interact, we don't know how to cooperate. And this is the trick that politicians use, and they use it with every problem. It's especially made up problem. Climate change. None of you can even comprehend that, so we have to rob everybody to save you from climate change by robbing you, because that'll magically make it not happen for some reason. But when we talk about, like, the poor, there are 12 bajillion homeless people in the country. Now, never mind that they lie their asses off about that stuff. Anyway, if they paint the picture as so enormously huge that, oh, us mere mortals can't possibly handle it. Yeah, except if you zoom in on any part of that, it's like, oh, here's a guy in need of help. Here's somebody with some serious mental issues who should probably do something different. Like, it's still just people. And to take the whole problem and go, look how big it is, as if it's all one big problem in one place, that is a brilliant politician trick to make people think, well, us mere mortals could never do that, especially like defending against foreign invaders. The number of privately armed Americans outnumbers all of the government militaries on the planet combined by a lot, by a huge margin. What if we get invaded? And it was a famous quote from some guy in Switzerland. I don't even know if it's true, but the rumor has it that like someone high up in the Third Reich was like, what are you going to do if we invade Switzerland? And the guy said, we'll each take one shot and go home. Because they were all armed, and even a tiny country like that's a lot of stinking people. Well, in this country, it's over 100 million people have guns. And by the way, they have about 3 each. So 2 seconds later, when they hand a couple spares to their neighbors, now 300 million of us have guns, privately owned guns. What military do you think is going to occupy a country in which 300 million people, A, don't believe those guys have the right to rule us, and B, are armed? Well, there's going to be tanks and bombers and stuff, okay? And do those machines require people that, like, drive them? Are they going to get out of the tank? Are they going to land the bomber at some point? Because if you had a country with 100 or 300 million people with guns who don't want you there, and you land your plane somewhere, pretty high likelihood that there's going to be somebody who's like a half-decent hunter who can blow your head off from 200 yards away the moment you step out of your bomber. Oops. And then it's their bomber. Same thing with a tank. You planning on living in that tank for the next 5 years, or are you going to get out at some point? And this is a thing that I want to make a more in-depth video about. But just when you picture the problem as this gigantic thing that we can't even fathom handling it as individuals, you're ignoring the fact that there's a lot of individuals, like billions of them. And if you have billions of people who recognize, one, nobody has the right to rule us, and two, we have the right to defend ourselves against aggressors, like any oppression and injustice that somebody tries to inflict on them, whether you're talking about a government, military, or just some thug, the people can find ways to organize and cooperate to defend themselves. It's not that difficult. Now, you don't get to know ahead of time exactly how that's going to happen because there is no master plan for how that's going to happen. There's people deciding what to do and how to organize. To me, the funniest part of this is, he says the bigger a population is, the more implausible it becomes. Why? Like, you can look at a huge population or you can look at little pieces of it. It's the same thing. Like, well, yeah, I get along with my neighbors, but what about some guy in Wisconsin? Well, he's not here, so I don't really give a crap. Like, in your day-to-day lives, you're already only dealing with a small number of people. Why would you look at some giant scale, 99% of which has nothing to do with you, and worry about that? All it is little human interactions across the whole world. And if you zoom in, you go, oh, here's this little group of people, this little group of people, this little group of people. They interact, they can trade, they can do stuff. Why would the big group be any different than lots and lots of little groups? It wouldn't. It's the same stinking thing. But politicians want people thinking on the huge scale so that the problems feel overwhelming, like us mere mortals could never handle it. But the funniest thing to me about this comment is kind of like trying to get 50 people to agree on pizza toppings. Good friggin' luck. Okay, I told you I was going to try not to make fun of this guy. It's hard to resist. Kind of like trying to get 50 people to agree on pizza toppings. Here's an idea. Make pizzas that aren't so big they're for 50 people. Maybe make them the size of 1 or 2 or 4 people and have people see if they can agree on toppings. Or make tiny little pizzas where each person, oh, wait a minute, I've seen that somewhere. It's called Every Pizza Shop in the World. Without government. There's no authority making 50 people agree on pizza toppings. So the fact that that was the example he came up with. And what is implied by that question? That we should have a department of pizza toppings and have a centralized authority deciding what the toppings will be for everybody, and it'll be forced on those 50 people? And maybe 2 or 3 of them will be happy because they bribed the politicians who run the Department of Pizza Topping to get the toppings they wanted. That's literally the outcome that happens when you involve government in anything. And the fact that he asked an example that's already dealt with by the free market in a really easy way that pretty much everybody in the country has seen. You get to order your own pizza. Now, if you have 4 people and they can agree on what toppings they want on a pizza, they might order 1 pizza and share it. Oh my gosh. Can you imagine the chaos, the anarchy of people deciding what they want and sometimes compromising and organizing? And some people say, oh, I don't like anchovies. Either don't put that on my side of the pizza or we'll get a separate pizza. And we can have pineapple on ours. Screw you. The fact that that was his question. 50 people trying to agree on pizza toppings. There are 2 options there. Let individuals decide what they want and buy different pizzas, or have the central authoritarian solution of the Federal Department of Pizza Toppings violently imposing the legislative solution of the politicians on everyone. your question answers itself in a way that's just, it's kind of hysterical that's what he ended. Good luck. Good luck having people figure out how to deal with pizza toppings without a centralized master plan. We do. That's not difficult. It happens every day all over the country and all over the world for that matter. But, and again, I'm trying not to make fun of him too much, but it's pretty damn funny that was what he had. That was his big punchline. You can't get people. But look at the mindset, and that is the challenge of getting people out of the mindset of there has to be a final decider. There has to be a centralized master plan that decides these things for us. Otherwise, we might have to order more than one pizza with different toppings on them. Oh my God. The chaos, the anarchy. We'll be killing and eating each other and putting each other on pizzas, apparently. Good grief. So again, my main response to people is, well, what would you do about these problems? What would you suggest? What would you do yourself? What do you think people should do? And then, do you really think you're going to have the best ideas in the world? Wouldn't you like to, instead of being forced to fund and go along with the government version of the solutions to all these and many more, which are always destructive and counterproductive, wouldn't you want to be able to choose for yourself which services to purchase, which solutions to be part of, whether it's like volunteering or economic trade or anything else? Why would you ever think that you're going to benefit by giving away your ability to choose and trading that in for political parasites forcing you to go along with their version of protection and justice and pizza toppings? Okay, guess I've ranted about that enough. Again, if you want a copy or a case of the Jones Plantation novel, it's thejonesplantation.com. If you haven't seen the movie, first of all, what's wrong with you? Second of all, jonesplantationfilm.com is where you can see that online. And January 20th, we'll be having the premiere of the movie in LA, and I will be there. So we'll see some of you there. So that's all for now. And when people when people have these questions about how will the world look if there isn't a ruling class, try to be more patient than I just was. Normally I can be sort of patient. But ask them what they think. Like, you're not the one who's going to be in charge, so you don't have to answer their questions. You're a person, they're a person. Their input, their choices, their ideas are just as important as yours. And this whole trick of trying to defer to somebody else, like somebody else has to tell me how this will work. Why? Why does somebody else have to tell you how that's going to work? Maybe you should be a grown-up and realize that people is all we have, and you're one of them. Maybe you should start thinking, what should we do about these things? And be a grown-up.